echoes from the graveyard. On the first night back, Mara felt she had returned to a place that remembered her before she remembered it. The town had not changed so much as receded, storefronts closed like eyes, streetlights coughing into fog. She came for a ledger, for the municipal archive's last misplaced volume that recorded the graveyard's upkeep and, reportedly, odd notations left by whoever had kept it. The caretakers had been few and secretive. Mr. Hale answered questions with small silences. That evening, the iron gate refused to welcome her smoothly, its latch catching like a throat. Inside the cemetery, the air was not simply cold, but reserved, as if it had been waiting. Paths braided between sunken stones and names half swallowed by moss. The oak tree stood like an old sentinel, its branches knitting the sky into a dim ceiling, and at its base, the ground was packed with years of quiet. Mr. Hale met her beneath the low boughs, his breath brief, the slow tick of a pocket watch audible, unnervingly human. He handed her a cloth-wrapped book with fingers that felt like folded paper. The ledger smelled of dust and rain. When she unfurled the brittle cover, names cascaded in ink, dates, tasks, tiny marginal notes like shorthand prayers. At first, they were banal pruning, mending, recording moon phases. Then she found a line that read Mara E. returned midnight watch with a date 5 years earlier than she remembered setting foot there. Her fingers hovered. The page trembled in a way that could have been the wind or the ledger itself. Mr. Hale's eyes watched her face, as if the entry had been an instrument of observation. Mara told herself the town was full of echoes, and that memory misfiled itself especially for the sleepless. She left the entry like a seed, pushing onward through other pages. A 3-line note about the listening knot, a sketch of the oak's hollow with a tiny, shaky arrow. The pocket watch on Mr. Hale's chain seemed to click in agreement with each word she read. The more she catalogued, the more the ledger's notes dovetailed with moments from her life. A cafe window she'd once traced with restless fingers, a rain-soaked bench she'd avoided on purpose. The small coincidences piled up like clean bones. She returned at midnight, compelled by a sentence that felt less like a suggestion and more like an instruction. The cemetery rearranged itself after dark. Shadows lengthened into intent. The air tasted like rehearsed silence. She held the ledger open and tried to map the entries to things she knew. Dates seemed to fold into one another, wrong by days that felt like edits. At the oak, the hollow appeared deeper, as though listening had been a habit practiced for decades. From somewhere close, a watch chimed once, not quite a bell, not quite a clock. In the hollow of the oak, she found the faded photograph tucked in a protective fold of bark, the paper soft and milky with age. A woman posed in front of the same tree, dress and expression caught in a time that felt like another life. There was a name on the back in a hand that resembled none she knew. E. Hale, keeper of hours. The photograph made a domestic claim on the spot, as if someone had once believed keeping a tree safe kept people safe too. Mara felt a tremor behind her ribs, an old familial logic being handed down, not by blood, but by habit. The ledger's marginal notes grew stranger in the center of the book, where ink scratched like someone speaking in low syllables. Count the returns, track the listening. One entry was simply a time, 02:13. Another line read, "She hears the watch." She answers. Mara's chest tightened, as if someone were rehearsing the way she might read a line from a play. She began to suspect the book did not just record maintenance, but measured attentions, and perhaps measured people. The town became less of a backdrop, and more like a device tuned to her frequency. When Mara confronted Mr. Hale, he smiled in a way that was neither wholly kind nor wholly cruel. He said nothing about the ledger's peculiarities. Instead, he offered stories about clocks and habit, about places that learn the rhythms of the people who breathe through them. "This place likes to be kept," he said, fingers closing around the pocket watch as if to hold its heart still. He would not say who had written the notes. He would not say whether a ledger ever closed. His silence folded around her like a coat. Sleep divorced her for nights that followed. Memories and ledger entries braided until she could not tell which was leading. In the margins now, she found a sentence written at a tilt she recognized as her own handwriting. "Do not trust the sound that mimics your past." The ink was smeared, as if written in haste or through tears. Mara learned she could hear things in the hush, a footstep that paused where none had been, a whisper that repeated the exact cadence of her childhood lullaby. Sound became suspicion, and suspicion became the only map she trusted. She tried to leave the ledger in the archive, locked behind municipal doors, but nights later notes appeared at her apartment. A single pressed leaf from the oak, a smudge of dirt like a fingerprint, a scrap of ledger paper with a time scrawled on it. Someone or something had learned how to find the small notches of her life and return them like testimony. The town's quietness no longer felt respectful. It felt like a lung holding its breath to watch how she breathed. The more she fled outward, the more the ledger's gravity pulled on her days. On the penultimate night, the pocket watch began to lose time. It skipped beats and then sped, making a human-sounding irregularity that matched her pulse. She opened the ledger to a final cluster of entries where names were circled and times set like appointments. At the center, a single line read, "Echo keeps company until you answer." Mara felt the sentence as a hand on her shoulder, but no heat followed, only the ledger's static insistence. She realized that the graveyard's record was not historical, but conversational. Waiting for replies, it could not elicit without participation. At midnight, she stood again beneath the oak ledger clutched, as if it were both talisman and accusation. The wind hushed, as if the world itself deferred to whatever might happen next. From the hollow came a sound like turning pages, though no wind moved there. Mara read aloud a line from the ledger, simply to test whether speech would change the ledger's shape. "I remember the woman who sat here." The watch chimed, late and uncertain. The hollow answered with a whisper that sounded eerily like her own voice, stretched by distance and time. In the last pages she turned, names looped back on themselves until the ledger read like a mirror. Entries that described her leaving, her return, and a future moment recorded with an exactness that folded her perspective inward. The final notation was simple, dated for the next night. Answer given. Keep her idle. There was no purging of dread in that line, only the recreation of a rhythm she could not stop listening to. She closed the book and felt, for a heartbeat, that the book had closed her instead. Mara left the ledger on the oak's lower root, where the town's gravity could cradle the book's appetite for attention. She walked away without turning back, hearing the gate creak like the slow inhalation of a thing mending itself. For weeks she told herself she had escaped the pattern, that its instruments could not follow beyond the fence of reason. Yet, at unexpected moments, she caught the tick of an internal watch that matched the brass pocket watch's uneven cadence. Sometimes in the hush, she heard a familiar voice answer with a phrase she had not yet spoken, and she wondered if the ledger had ever been keeping time at all, or keeping her.